Hey everybody, how's it going? It is streaming time. I'm just gonna wait a few minutes for people to come in, per usual. Hopefully that goes okay. I have a package coming today. I don't know how that's gonna work out and when they're gonna come. So if I have to get up and leave suddenly, that's why. Um, but yeah, for those on YouTube, I'll have timestamps and shit like that for you. Why am I dropping a lot of frames like always? I'll exit out of Discord. Go away. I'll exit out of Steam. I shouldn't be. What do you mean error? Huh. Frame. Like, I have two tabs open in Chrome. Almost everything else is closed. Hmm. Hmm. I'm just gonna wait a few minutes, more than usual, maybe, to see if the frame rate gets better. Because I don't know what's happening with this. Like, I have all my programs closed. Hold on. Okay, this might fuck with the stream, but I'll open the task manager and see. Come to a game. Eating on Chrome. Hmm. What's neighbors? I know. Why are so many Google Chrome things open? I only have two tabs open. Let me close Chrome and open it again and see if that does anything. Because this is just ridiculous. Oh, well, now it says it's good. My computer still says it's running at 93 fucking CPU, but and now you guys get my AC in the background. Because I'm not a professional streamer, so I don't care about that not happening. There we go. Now my chat's up on my phone. Okay, I'm still going to reopen it. Okie dokie. Cool. I'll have you guys tell me if anything looks bad or any of that shit. I mean, again, I'm just reading, so it shouldn't be that big of a deal. Oh. Yeah, because that's still scrolling fine and everything. I'm gonna wait another few minutes just because we had some technical issues. Hey, how is it going? How's the stream looking for you? It keeps telling me I'm dropping a lot of frames, and I don't know if it's bad shit on your end or if it's fine because I'm just reading. Like, if the screen lags, that's fine, as long as, like, me talking doesn't lag, you know? Okie dokie. Everything's set up now. Got shit on my phone. I guess I'll just wait till I hit 10 minutes to start. Just because that's a nice round number. And I just tweeted again, so now people know to get in here. And it gives me a few more minutes to make sure that everything is going right on you guys' end, your end, whatever, y'all's end. Cause yeah. Oh, let me mute my phone. But yeah, how's everyone doing this fine Sunday afternoon? Oh hey, it's Lee, listening while playing Animal Crossing. That's good. Just chilling. Animal Crossing. I got on Animal Crossing this morning. Got my fucking turnips. Got my shit from Red. So I did all my daily Animal Crossing duties. I don't know how long I'm going to keep up going regularly, but hey, it's nice while it lasts. Okay, we are now after 10 minutes. I didn't even pay attention. So, yeah, so we're about to start on the next arc. I wanted to talk a bit more about the first arc, because this next arc was kind of scary for me to write, because the first one is what I really had planned. Like, my whole concept for this fic, well, for one, it started out with, hey, what if classes were literal? I mean, I'm thinking of Dirt Cat, and I'm trying to think of some good Dirt Cat stuff, and Dirk's a prince, and Karkat's a knight. Like, it's a dynamic already fucking built in, you know? So I was thinking about it that way, and then it's like, okay, well, like, how could Dirk get Karkat as his? Like, what can I do to, like, put them together? And I started thinking about how Dave's a knight too, and this, like, what if Dirk wanted Karkat close to him for some reason, and all this other shit. And so the tournament art came because I'm like, hey, it's a secret prize at the end of the tournament is like, not you get my hand in marriage, but you get to be my personal knight. And so that was all I thought of for the fic. It was just going to be a couple chapters of like, hey, here's the characters, here's the tournament. Now they're together after the tournament, and it's all good now. So yeah, I was very excited to finish writing the tournament arc, and very scared to start writing anything else, because anything else wasn't really part of my initial plan, like, kind of vaguely. But, like, especially when I was writing the tournament arc, I had so much planned for it that I didn't really think about anything else. And thankfully, I was able to get an outline for this arc done fairly quickly. It changed a lot as I was writing it. I had other shit crop up when I was writing that that switched shit around a bit. But yeah, so this arc is it definitely had a lot less going into it than the first arc, which I think is kind of clear because the first arc was 19 chapters. Even if we're just talking about when they get into the tournament proper, like, that's still like 16 chapters or some shit. And this next arc, I am getting done with the final chapter, which is chapter 30. So this one is 11 chapters. So there's just when you don't have to have 1,000 people fighting each other, it goes a lot more quickly, you know? So, so yeah, and now I'm having the same anxiety of, I knew how this arc was going to end a little bit into it. I knew what I wanted to happen there. And I'm getting to that, and I'm writing that, and now I'm like, well, fuck. What's the next arc? I kind of know. I kind of have a general idea of what it's going to be, but yeah, it's like, I know where this story is headed. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I have an idea of what I want everything to be in the end. It's just like, right now this is me dealing with little details of getting to that end and getting to it in a satisfying way. So yeah, so I can't decide if I'm going to so definitely there's a chapter going up Monday, tomorrow. Chapter 29 is going up tomorrow. If you are a patron, Jack's Yaks on Patreon, then you get the chapter a day early, so it is already up today for patrons. But for everyone else, it's coming out tomorrow, and so that's definitely happening. I just don't know if I'm going to have chapter 30 happen this week, or if I'm going to wait till next week and then push starting the next arc to the week after that and give myself more time to get it planned out. I guess by like Wednesday or Friday I'll have figured it out, because I want to release on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or at least Monday, depending on what I have ready. And so the second arc, or the third arc, I guess, the next arc won't be starting this week. It will definitely not be starting until next week at the earliest. But I just don't know if I'm going to give myself a week to get that planned out or 2 weeks. So that's kind of where I'm at right now with everything. The first arc had so many fucking characters, which, like, of course, like, I was doing a tournament arc. Like, you need other characters to go up against. I didn't have to have that many characters, though. I could have toned that down some. I could have had a smaller fucking tournament. But no, I had a big fucking tournament, so many fucking characters, and, yeah, this next arc does not have as many characters. We do get one new one introduced, I think. Like, definitely one. I don't think more than one. No, we get more than one introduced. But I'm not dealing with dozens of characters, so it's a lot easier to handle. So, yeah, it was fun writing all those different characters, though. There were some voices I really liked writing more than others. Equius was really fun to write, and Aridin was a lot of fun. I mean, I always have fun writing Dirk, Karkat, and Dave, and Rose. But yeah, I definitely had a lot of fun with Equius and Aridin. They're so wonderful to write. John is also a lot of fun to write. Like, I like John as a dumbass, like, in most interpretations of him, but I guess whenever I write him, he's not a dumbass, he's just an ass. And I love that about him. So, yeah. But yeah, and we'll be getting more of some of those characters. I mean, obviously, the main ones we're getting in this. And, yeah, if I think of anything else to say about the first arc, or if you have any questions about the first arc, I'll answer them, and I'll talk more about it. But yeah, let's get started with Chapter 20, The Lull Between. Karkat gets ready for his new position. Notes. Just a short one today. I have a longer one ready for Monday, so see you then. If Karkat thought his week before officially becoming Prince Deirdric's personal knight would be an easy one, he thought wrong. His days were booked. Extra training from his captain, pushing him where she saw weaknesses during his matches, teaching you how not to get hit, as Dave said, making sure he was in top shape for his majesty. Then there were tours of the castle. Why did it have to be so big? His new quarters were the most important part. By the end of the week, they made him walk blindfolded from the main entrance to it because he honestly didn't know. Not only were they important because that's where he'd be spending his nights and downtime, but also because it was a suite connected to the prince's to be prepared for any midnight emergency. He really hoped that was more theoretical than anything anyone expected to happen. Then there was the scheduling, which was annoying, but Karkat was thankful for. His major patrols were being scheduled in advance, so there were little blips of time away from the prince he could look forward to. The first was his second weekend, the second a few weeks after that, and the rest a bit farther down the road. He hated how excited he was for patrols, which were usually boring and lonely if he was sent alone, like he would be for these, but at least that would give him some time away and help him gradually adjust to his new role. What was actually annoying were the etiquette lessons. How to bow to nobles, how to address the prince if he needed to interrupt, how to never, ever look him in the eye, how to never, ever enter his chambers unless it was an aforementioned emergency, etc. He hadn't realized his majesty, an acceptable term, he found out, what a weight off his mind, had such a stick up his ass about these things. Whatever. The rules were easy enough to follow, as he had been doing most of them already. They did teach you something when you became a royal knight. For the most part, he was to shut up, be seen, not heard. That wouldn't be too hard, right? Dave laughed a lot when he expressed the sentiment to him. Fuck Dave. He could do it. The guy was still too caught up in his giddy new relationship high to be reasonable anyway. Throughout all this, Karkat barely had enough time to get a decent night's rest, much less spend time reading the scrolls and books he bought from the history vendor at the last night of the festival. They were still waiting in his pack. From glancing over it, it had seemed like pretty mundane readings, stuff he might have learned from anyone willing to sit down and talk about recent sky and history, but the vendor insisted nothing shone quite so brightly without need, and that her records were better than any you could find elsewhere. But they could wait. For the time Karkat needed to concentrate on not being hit during his bouts with Captain Pyrope, her practice sword was basically a thin stick that left angry red welts when he failed to dodge or block, and memorized just about everything else. If Karkat found it odd that through all his trips to the castle he never saw Prince Deirdric, Well, he didn't say anything. He'd be seeing plenty of the man before long. Sooner than he'd like, it was his last night in his own bed. He had turned in early, since he would have an equally early start the next morning, and laid there, willing himself to fall asleep to the sounds of snoring, low chatter, and distant horses that usually did the trick. Not tonight. Tonight he closed his eyes and clung to the sounds. The wing his new room was in had been so quiet when he visited, it could only be quieter at night. He would miss this. The noise. The people. He knew he would still be training with them, working with them, but no longer living with them for the first time in 10 years. Something shoved against him, and he opened his eyes to see Dave silhouetted in the moonlight. "Move over," he said. Karkat did, squishing himself into the wall as Dave climbed in bed next to him. "God, how does this still barely hold us, like our old cots did back when we were pages?" he asked.
"We're a lot bigger now, dumbass."
Despite the bite in his words, Karkat wrapped his arms around his friend and helped pull him into the bed. They were silent for a moment, and Karkat could already feel himself relaxing more with the presence next to him, but this was just another sense he wanted to cling on to as long as he could. "You're not dying, you know," Dave said, as though sensing his restless thoughts.
"I know."
"This is a promotion, not a punishment. When you would have killed for a few months ago."
I know."
"I'll still see you basically every day."
"I know."
"I'll miss you." Karkat hesitated.
"I'll miss you too."
With Dave's heartbeat next to his breath in his ear, he was finally able to drift off to sleep. Dave and Karkat are cute together, actually. Even if they're friends in this one and not, like, dating, their relationship is very important to me. And I love them. So, I don't know. I just want to remind everyone that Dave and Karkat's relationship is important. It's so important that it's one of the tags. Chapter 21, Learning the Ropes, which is the title of this arc. Karkat's duties officially begin. Both he and Dirk could feel more comfortable about it. Notes. Got some extra content linked in at the end as well. It's not required reading, but a little fun bonus I wrote. Hope you enjoy this beefy boy. I'll see y'all Wednesday. Oh, yeah. Okay, so cool. We get to get the first of my extra content at the end of this, because obviously I'm going to read it. Karkat woke up at the crack of dawn and carefully peeled himself out of Dave's grip. He splashed some water on his face, dressed in his best outfit. It fit oddly. Too tight in some places, too loose in others. He needed to get it to a tailor. Grabbed his bag and headed to the mess hall to snag a bite to eat before starting his first day at the castle. Apparently that wasn't on the schedule, though, because he was immediately greeted by a woman he assumed to be one of the castle's servants, though he hadn't seen her around before. She wore a deep red dress with a floor-length skirt and was accented by skies bronze and blue, which, Lee, you pointed out, is Ravenclaw's colors, which is great, because I did not intend that, but it works out, because I'm a Ravenclaw, so it's nice. An odd combination, but she made it work. Her hair was a bundle of tight curls around her face and down her back, and her eyes were just a shade darker red than Karkat's, and her smile was unsettling. She waved at him. Oh god, now I needed a radio voice. "You must be Karkat," she said as he approached, gesturing to his pin.
"Unfortunately. And you are?"
"Aradia! Nice to meet you." She held out her hand and vigorously shook his when Karkat accepted the handshake. "I'm here to take you to the castle."
"Does His Majesty think I'll get lost? I was shown the layout at least a dozen times last week."
She shrugged. "I think he just wants to keep me out of trouble. Let's go." With that, she grabbed his arm by the elbow and yanked him forward and out the mess hall.
"But what about..."
"Breakfast? You'll be eating with the prince."
Or, well, you should be. But somebody decided to take his meals in his room today, and I wanted your first meal to be in the actual dining hall. Doesn't he need me or something?
Iridia paused and rolled her eyes at him.
Of course he does. They always do. They just have a hard time realizing it. So dining hall it is.
Karkat had only seen the dining hall packed with people after some ceremony or announcement or other. At this early hour, it was practically empty, just a handful of servants wandering around and minding the 4 figures at the end of the long table.
Oh! Iridia exclaimed. Rose!
Karkat's stomach lurched. Sure enough, it was the seer and the 3 Fae eating breakfast together. He hoped Iridia would take this as a sign now was not a good time to eat here and let him go back to the mess hall.
Rose, have you met Karkat?
So much for that. Before Karkat could protest, Iridia was dragging him to meet the prince's cousin, who was appraising him with an unreadable expression as they approached. I have not, the seer said as soon as they were in range of normal speaking volumes, though I agree it is about time I did. How are you, Cervantes?
Fine, milady.
The Fae chuckled, but the seer smiled lightly. You may call me Rose. I have no use for such formalities. The wolf woman, Harley, draped an arm over the seer, Rose's shoulder.
Are you certain, milady?
She murmured. Rose bunched up her face and bopped Harley on the nose with her finger. Later, she said, and Karkat did his best not to think about what that meant as the other 2 giggled. Would you like to join us for breakfast? Miriam asked.
We'd be happy to,
Iridia said. She waved down one of the servants, then sat next to Pyxis and ordered herself some eggs and toast. Then they looked expectantly to Karkat, who was still deciding on a seat. The same, he said, finally choosing a spot next to Miriam. Rose watched him as he sat, and Karkat suddenly felt like he was being graded on something. So, you know me, of course, and Feferi, and I believe you've spoken with Kanaya? Karkat and Kanaya both nodded, though Kanaya and the other 2 smirked somewhat. That leaves Jade. She was looking forward to go against you in unarmed combat. Pity that English fellow got the better of her.
Yeah, he was all right,
Jade snorted. Karkat couldn't tell if she meant him or English. And congratulations are in order, of course, for your new position.
Thanks,
Karkat muttered. Rose raised her eyebrows. Not pleased with it?
Can you blame him? Iridia chimed in. He's already being snubbed at breakfast.
Yes, the prince is in something of a mood this morning. You'll have to forgive him. Iridia and the Fae chuckled, but Karkat had no idea how to respond to that, so he just nodded.
It's fine.
It's rude, Feferi said. I think he's just nervous, Jade snickered. Karkat stared at her. Nervous? Yes, that could be it, Kanaya agreed. Karkat looked to Rose for some confirmation or denial on this wild supposition, but she merely quirked her lip up in a smile. Whatever the reason, you'll see him soon enough, and I am glad it's given me time to properly meet you. And see you again, Iridia. How long has it been?
Over a year, I think. I was out on a dig before you left, and I just came back from another last night. Cave in. Pity. Not staying for long, though. Set to head off next week. I think His Highness is trying to keep me out of trouble. She smiled broadly throughout all this, which somewhat unnerved Karkat. Well, I'm especially glad our paths were able to intersect this morning. I would hate to miss you again. You should come out to one of my sites sometime. You'd love it. Rose tapped her chin in consideration. Now there is a thought. The servant came back with Karkat and Iradia's food, and Karkat's mouth watered hungrily at the sight and smells. He did his best to not scarf it down like an uncultured beast, but his stomach growled loudly, assuring everyone he absolutely wanted to. The others were polite and pretended not to notice, outside of a snicker from Jade. So, Karkat, do you mind if I call you Karkat? Rose asked. Karkat shook his head. Wonderful. So, Karkat, she began again, what brought you to be a knight in the first place? Carcat swallowed a bite of yolk-covered toast and washed it down with a swig of juice, then said, "Wanted to be a knight, so here I am." Surely it wasn't as simple as that. Do you not have a family, or were you raised amongst the pages?
Bit of both. Used to have a family, don't anymore. Became a page, he shrugged. Pretty simple.
I see, she said. And if it looked like she didn't quite believe him, Karka didn't care, and she didn't press further. It didn't take much longer for him and Aradia to finish their breakfast.
About time we head up to see His Highness. Might have to remind him he had other responsibilities today, Aradia laughed.
Tell him I said hello, and to stop being such a recluse, Rose said. Aradia nodded.
Will do. Let's go, Karkat.
Farewell, Karkat. It was lovely to see you, Kanaya said.
Karkat got up and, unsure of what to do, but remembering his training from the previous week, bowed, then turned and quickly followed Aradia away, ignoring the laughter that came behind. Even though Karkat had been around the castle dozens of times in the past week, he didn't recognize the path Aradia was taking, and was surprised when, in a few minutes, he was in front of the prince's study. He didn't think they had taken enough stairs for that, but here they were. He looked at her questioningly, but she just smiled and said, "Servant secrets." She knocked on the large, ornately carved wooden door and barely waited for a muffled, "Come in," before opening it and dragging Karkat inside. She curtsied deeply, and Karkat quickly followed suit. When he looked up, he saw an especially stoic-looking Prince Deirdric, inkwell in hand, surrounded by several small stacks of paper and a plate of barely touched bread and ham, the window behind him haloing him in the rising morning sun. Karkat's heart skipped a beat when he noticed a thin red scar still on his cheek where Karkat's dagger had sliced him. "I've brought you the night like you asked, my prince." His Majesty's eyebrows scrunched up for just a moment, then glanced behind the two at the large standing clock. "Of course. Thank you, Aradia. Anything else?" "Rose says hello and asks you to come out of your room more often."
The prince snorted, which startled Karkat. "I'll say the same to her next time she's busy with something. You know how she gets." Aradia snickered. "Well, if that's it, you may be dismissed." She curtsied again. "I'll be back for lunch." Karkat could have sworn a smirk ghosted his lips. "As you wish." When Aradia was gone, leaving Karkat standing awkwardly in front of his liege, feeling like cattle on the auction block as he looked him up and down. "I'm afraid I don't have anything exciting for you today," the prince finally said, "but maybe this is a nice, soft introduction for your duties, which, for today, will be simply to stay with me and scare off anyone who tries to interrupt me." Karkat stared at him.
"You're not serious."
Prince Deirdric stared back. Karkat jerked his eyes away from his face, careful to avoid eye contact.
"You're not serious, Your Majesty,"
he corrected, doing his best not to sound too sarcastic. Apparently it was enough, because the prince looked back to his paperwork. "I am. There are a lot of things still left over from the festival I need to address, not to mention the resources I need to approve to be allocated for the harvest season, or the preparations to be made if it's worse than last year's, or, well," he sighed. "The less people interrupt me, the less you'll have to stand around doing nothing. How about that?" Karkat wanted to ask why there wasn't an advisor who could do some of this, but he bit his tongue and just nodded. "Though, of course, if you want to sit, you're free to do so in between any unwanted visitors."
"I'll stand, Majesty."
The prince shrugged. "Suit yourself." He began flipping through his papers with more focus, scribbling notes on some of them. The scribbling was the only sound made in the room, which was fine in the first few minutes, but somehow turned irritatingly loud afterward. Karkat kept waiting for His Majesty to say something else to break the not silence like Karkat was dying to do, but it's like they weren't even in the same room. Annoyed and bored, but knowing his place, Karkat stood and waited to be useful. Despite his concerns, the first few hours went by with no interruptions, the first being Aradia back for lunch. "Will you be joining us, Highness?" she asked, Cervantes already in hand. Dirk shook his head, and thankfully she took it without a fight. "I'll have someone send up a plate for you, and to take your half-eaten ham." She said the last pointedly, but Dirk just said a quick, "Thanks," and they were gone. Dirk relaxed back in his chair and sighed. He hadn't considered how much harder it would be to work with Vantis in the room with him. He felt as though the knight had been staring daggers in his back the whole time, but didn't want to turn to look and confirm it. What was also distracting was the questions broiling in the back of his mind, but it was too soon to pry, so he just had to stew in his own curiosity. There was a knock on the door, and Dirk gave his assent for whomever to enter. It was Rose, with a steaming pile of potatoes, beef, and carrots, and a glass of water. "How goes the first day?" she asked as she set the dishes on his desk and removed his old ones. Dirk gestured vaguely at his paperwork. "Still a lot to do." "Surely this could have waited until next week, and you could find something more exciting to do with your new royal guard." "I'd like as few nobles and guild leaders up my ass as possible, thanks. Plus, this is a good way for us to get used to each other." Rose snorted. "You sound like you're courting a nervous horse." "Nothing so dramatic. I'm just not used to having people around, and well, I don't think he likes me very much." Rose laughed. Full-blown laughter from the belly for a good long minute. Dirk just frowned at her, the tips of his ears heating up. "Oh, dear cousin, my liege, heir to the throne of Skya," she said when she calmed down. "I admit you're a prickly sort to strangers at the best of times, but if you keep fussing over whether your new guard likes you very much, I think the two of you will get on before too long." "Excuse me for wanting the person who guards my back to not want a knife in it." Rose rolled her eyes. "You have evidence on your very face that if he wanted a knife in you, he would have done it already." Dirk ghosted his finger over the scar reflexively. "Be that as it may, he needs to at least respect me somewhat if I want him to open up more, or else this whole thing will have been pointless." Rose sighed. "I do quite hope you know what you're doing, Dirk." He let out a short bark of a laugh. "Me too, Rose." There was another knock at the door. "That'll be my cue to leave. Do try to eat something, dear." Dirk rolled his eyes, but stabbed his fork into a piece of meat and ate it dutifully. "Happy?" "Very." Rose smiled. Then she opened the door and let Aradia and Cervantes in. "Pardon the intrusion," Aradia said, not looking sorry at all. "No worries, I was just leaving. Come now, Aradia, let these two have fun," Rose said, placing her hand on Aradia's shoulder to guide her away and closing the door behind them. Vantis stared at Dirk for a moment, then resumed his place a bit behind him. It didn't take long for the second interruption. The knock was brisk and insistent, and its owner, a minor noble that Dirk was expecting to come and plead his case for further resources, rushed in as soon as he was granted permission, then immediately wilted and glanced back and forth between Dirk and his new royal guard. "Is this urgent?" Dirk asked. The man swallowed as he looked at the knight. No. My apologies. I'll take my leave." Then he rushed out as quickly as he had entered. Dirk repressed a laugh. "That was efficient." Vantis just grunted in response. And that's how the rest of the day played out. Karkat standing around doing nothing while warding off the other handful of nobles and advisors that tried to talk to His Majesty. He barely even needed to glare at them before they backed off. If it wasn't for Aradia coming back to take him to dinner, he might have fallen asleep on the spot, and was still at risk doing so when he returned to his post. All the while, the prince barely acknowledged his existence, just sat at his desk, seemingly increasingly frustrated at the piles of work before him. He might as well have hired a guard dog. When the light outside was finally growing dim, Prince Diedrich sighed and relaxed back in his chair, setting his quill down. "Good enough for today, I think. Be here at the same time tomorrow. Let's head back to our quarters then, shall we?" He straightened up a few of the piles, then gestured to the door. Karkat opened it and followed the prince through, but couldn't help but ask, "We're doing this again? Majesty?" he tacked on at the end before he could be reprimanded. A look Karkat couldn't name passed over the prince's face, then he nodded. "You get the last day of this week for training and free time before you go on patrol, but I imagine this is what the rest of your week will look like. Karkat must have looked unhappy about the idea, because the prince continued, Rises in rank don't always go hand in hand with more glorious work most days, Cervantes, and in fact, the more mundane the work, the better things are usually going. Something to keep in mind. Yes, Majesty, Karkat said, more neutrally than he felt. They stopped in front of the door to Prince Deirdric's suite. No need to wait on me for breakfast tomorrow. Just meet me at the study. Karkat was sure if Aradia or Rhodes were here, they'd argue, but he just nodded, already relishing the bit of free time he got during meals. At least their people talked. Good night, then, Cervantes, the prince said. Good night, Majesty, Karkat said. Prince Deirdric went into his room, shutting the door soundly behind him, and Karkat went to his zone next door. He tried not to focus on how it was almost as large as the room he had shared with a dozen other knights in the barracks, or how the bed could easily fit 2 or 3 more people in it comfortably. He stripped off his clothes and lay down on it, curled into himself as his mind absently searched the silence for some sort of white noise to cling on to. Nothing. Instead, Karkat mentally scoffed at what the prince had said. Surely paperwork couldn't take up a whole week of time. Surely the ruler of Skye would have something better to do than sit in an increasingly claustrophobic study doing what appeared to be clerk's work. Nope. A restless night and bleary-eyed breakfast with Aradia, no CRFA this time, thankfully, later found Karkat back at what he was doing the day before, except this time only a scant few nobles or advisors or whoever the hell they were popped by, seemingly expecting him, but still leaving swiftly when he stared at them for more than a few seconds. He couldn't pretend it didn't please him somewhat. He had always been a short man, but had beefed up quite nicely, if he did say so himself, to get exactly this sort of reaction. He just expected to be getting it from bandits or other sorts of evildoers rather than dignitaries for his own kingdom. Prince Deirdric remained silent throughout, only responding to his unwanted visitors or Aradia bringing him his meals, and then at the end of the night to give Karkat the same instructions for the following day. If Karkat noticed he looked more weary and on edge than paperwork would suggest, he surely didn't mention it. The next 4 days went like this as well, with no free time during them to see Dave or the other knights like he had hoped he'd be able to, until Karkat was leaving Prince Deirdric at his room's door again, and the prince started to say the same spiel about meeting him at the study. Wait, the prince said, interrupting himself. Tomorrow's your day of training. You won't be back until after your patrol. Karkat nodded, finding himself relieved His Majesty remembered and didn't expect him again the next day. He did not want to be caught between correcting him and getting his free day. Well, in that case, safe travels, Cervantes. I'll see you when you return. It sounded light and sincere, which Karkat didn't expect. Maybe that's what emboldened him to say what he said next. Maybe he heard something off in the prince's voice besides sincerity, tinged perhaps by the dark circles ghosting under his eyes. Whatever it was, he found himself saying, Good luck with the nobles, sire. And if you need to replace me with a gargoyle when I'm gone, I won't hold it against you. The prince stared at him for a few seconds, and Karkat was afraid he had overstepped, but to his surprise, the prince's face soon broke into a smile, and he laughed, so heavily he leaned against the door for support. It did something to Karkat, that smile. Made him realize he had never seen His Majesty look so real. It tugged at him in a way that was reminiscent of the bard's song from a week ago, deep and bittersweet. He shook the feeling off as the prince's laughter calmed. Good night, Majesty. Good night, Cervantes. Prince Deirdric was still smiling as he entered his room, closing the door behind him. Karkat went to his own, and for the first time that week, found himself swiftly falling asleep. His day for training and leisure went fine, he guessed. Half the other knights, including Dave, were on patrols of their own, but at least he was getting smacked less by Captain Pyrub's practice sword. Less rushing in, more making them come to you. Easy peasy. For the last half of his day, he sat against a tree near the training grounds and fished out the books and scrolls he had bought at the festival from his pack, the sounds of his fellow knights around him turning into a comforting background noise. Each work was wrapped in a cloth with the years they were about written on it, none going further back than 20 or 30 years. Karkat figured it was most recent that would be the most relevant, so he grabbed the scroll that was dated just a few years ago, after the end of the Dursite Prospition War. Liberating the bilious plains, selfless or calculated. Now we get some bonus shit. An excerpt from the scroll about recent history Karkat purchased from the vendor. The bilious plains had been hotly contested land bordering what is now the Dursite Prospition Confederacy and the Kingdom of Skya for a century or longer. A relatively small piece of land compared to the other nations, ruled by a prince who did their best to stay out of politics, they were nonetheless routinely dragged into them when one of the bordering nations set their eye on expansion. The only thing that saved them from all-out war was the one constantly brewing between Durs and Prospit, which always happened to grow especially worrisome whenever one country lingered too long on the plains. Otherwise, the bilious plains were relatively peaceful, self-sufficient with their unfortunately named landscape and deep springs. It is a wonder, then, to some scholars at least, how the Shade Ogre ended up terrorizing the small kingdom. Ogres, as well-learned readers may know, are virtually never seen outside the liminal forests, and had not been known to attack people out in the open, much less for more than a night or two so far downriver, in decades. Is it not natural, then, that some scholars find it curious how swiftly Prince Deirdric of Skya responded, how relatively easily he took down the ogre? Is it not also curious that Prince Felix of the Bilious Plains so easily gave up ownership of the land to Skya not a year later? Some scholars find this to be yet another oddity in what has been an increasingly strange rule since Prince Deirdric took the throne after the disappearance of the king and queen, when he was still on the precipice of puberty. Some may argue that this is all a coincidence, and can be explained away reasonably, but I leave you, dear reader, with one question. Why has Prince Deirdric not yet claimed his rightful coronation ceremony and ruled as king? He tried reading it in earnest, he really did, but it seemed to be the one person's conspiracy theory about the prince's rule, and though Karkat's suspicions of the prince had not quite died down, he doubted he was spearheading some master plot to take over other kingdoms. Not to mention the author kept referring to some scholars, which he was pretty sure was a roundabout way to refer to themselves. The only real things of note were how long it had been since the king and queen of Skya had gone missing, so long most people tended to forget there was technically still a king and queen, and that Prince Deirdric still hadn't held the ceremony to become ruler and fool, despite now even having the Prince of the Bilious Plains also under his rule. Karkat wasn't sure if there were things a prince couldn't do that a king could, or if it was just a formality by this point, but either way did make the decision not to be coronated by now seem odd when he stopped to think about it. Whatever. He wasn't sure how this was relevant to him at all, beyond the fact his patrol would take him near the border, and hoped the rest of the writings were more interesting, and less paranoid. For the time being, he packed up his books and headed back to his room for the rest of the night, excited for a week that at least could not be more boring than this one. Okie dokie. Yeah, that one was a bit of a long chapter, I think. It's my first of the readings that Karkat bought. We have 2 more that I've written left. I don't know if there's others in his pack that I'm going to write, because the other 2 that I was thinking of when I initially gave him the books have been written by now. One of them will come out tomorrow. And yeah, that was a tough chapter. It's one that I sat on for a bit because I had a bit of a buffer. And it let me go back and add some things and change some things, which I'm thankful for. Most of these have been pretty close to writing and then posting. Even if I do have a buffer, a lot of times I just try to stop editing and re-editing and just post it when I see it. Or when I need to. But this is one of the ones that I went back and just added some smaller details and changed around some things and stuff like that. Like the description for the book being read, because I do want to make those extra content that you don't have to read. If you have to click on a link to go somewhere else, I don't want to make that required reading to understand the story, or to see things happening or anything like that. So making sure that Karkat mentioned all the relevant information that was in there without just rewriting the whole thing was hard. So that was something I had to rewrite a couple of times. So, but yeah, that was a fun chapter to write. Getting Karkat and Dirk to start actually interacting as little as they did was nice. And we're just kind of like getting into the shit now. Chapter 22. Thieves of Flight. Karkat heads out on patrol with his prized companion. Dirk is given some worrying information. Oh yeah, here's some more extra information. Okay, here's a map that might help contextualize things. I'll try not to rely on you guys seeing the map to understand what's going on, but I figured it might help. Someone did offer to draw the map because they like drawing maps, and they asked a lot of like really interesting questions that made me think about shit more. They have not gotten back to me with the map. I don't know if they changed their mind or if it's taking a long time or something else came up. I might ask them about it, but like they were going to do it for free, so it's not like it's a cool idea to offer, but if they don't get around to it, that's fine. Like that's, you know, it was a cool thing to offer at the very least, and it made me think about my shit more. So this is the tentative map, and what I'll be using if I don't get the other one. We have Skaya, Durs, and Prospit, and then the Wastes, the Liminal Forests, the Medici, Prospition Chain, and Dursite Chain. I thought was really neat naming the Insip River. So what I came to with this map is these countries all had to be next to each other. The Bilious Plains had to be connected to all of them. Like it had to be contested area, and yeah, so it was hard getting all of them to be near each other. Everything else was just kind of extra. Well, the forest has some Prospect and not near Skaya. They get kind of near Skaya down here, but it's still not like, I mean, like Durs and Prospect definitely deal with them more. And I think those were like the basics of what I wanted whenever I made this. Durs and Prospect had to be kind of similar in size. But yeah, I think that's like the important things about this whenever I was making it. The towns are kind of just there. They're not quite as important, but yeah. And then we have the wastes over here, which is neat. It's like a desert. But yeah, so this is here that you can go back to and look at. It hasn't been so relevant in the last couple of chapters, but it might become relevant again. So I have it for reference for me, because this 5-chapter fic that it was supposed to be now has a fucking map. First time I've ever made a map for something. Okie dokie. Karkat was tightening the straps for his saddlebags, almost ready to ride off on his patrol down the main highway toward where the Prospition Chain connected to the Insip River. He wouldn't be going all the way to the border, but he had packed as though he would. He could never be too careful. He was interrupted from his mental checklist of his provisions by a horse and cart pulling up to him. "Hi!" the driver called cheerily. It was Aradia. "Hi. You heading out today, too?" "Yep. With you, in fact." Karkat stared at her. What do you mean, with me?" "The next dig site His Highness is sending me to is just a day's ride toward Prospect off the main road, so he thought it prudent to send me with you at least part of the way," she explained, her smile never faltering.
Karkat frowned, but to be honest, he was pleased to have the company after being effectively alone so much of the past week. Fine, if His Majesty insists. Aradia flapped her hands in excitement as she waited for Karkat to mount his horse. When she was settled, he gestured forward, and they were off, Karkat leading the way. Missing him already? Dirk started and whipped away from the window to see Rose behind him, an amused smirk playing across her face. I thought you would be enjoying your privacy again, she continued. And what privacy is that? He asked pointedly. She just smiled. I am enjoying it, or will. While he has successfully driven off the majority of the pests and saved me time, I feel I lost an equal amount getting used to being watched all the time. By someone other than you, at least. Rose chuckled. I don't watch you all the time, dear, and I'll be out of your hair soon enough. Oh? I requested the use of Prince Eridan's libraries, and he has agreed. I have a few things to finish up here first, but I'll be leaving in a few weeks. For how long? It came out needier than he intended. Rosa's smile faltered. I don't know, Dirk. You know how I get when I'm on a research binge. If I don't find anything, a week or two, but then I'll probably request the same of Prince Kurlos. If I find something, well, that's something else entirely. Dirk just nodded in acknowledgement. I'm still here now, Dirk. Come have lunch with us. Kanaya convinced the cooks to let her whip something up from back home. Dirk hesitated, then shook his head. I should attend to my duties. I believe I have petitioners today. Some other time. And before Rose could say another word, he walked off. The main road led through the capital, as one might expect, and Karkat didn't care for it at all. He had been through it dozens or hundreds of times and hated the noises and the smells and the people darting out in front of him. This time was no different, except... Were they staring at him? The streets seemed to quiet just a little as he passed through them, and he urged his horse to suddenly pick up the pace to reach the front gates more quickly. Aradia pulled her cart up next to him. It's because of your new status, she explained, still smiling, but looking a little weary around the eyes. The noise must have been getting to her, too. Why, I haven't done anything with it. She shook her head. It's what you've done to deserve it. Most of them were at your matches, and they heard about your fight with the thieves. What's so exciting about that? Dave was there too, and we didn't catch them. She looked around conspiratorially. I'll explain when we're back out of the city, she said, then let her horse and cart fall back to its position a few paces behind him. All the more reason to get out of there as quickly as possible. The petitioners looked so nervous, Dirk almost wanted to turn and make sure Sir Vantus wasn't standing behind him anymore. Must be him. He did his best to straighten out his face for the next few, and that seemed to help a bit. He was annoyed, though. About half of these were subjects of some of the nobles scared off the previous week, with oddly specific requests for their lands or work area for the harvest and barren seasons. It wasn't their fault, of course, so he tried not to direct his annoyance to them. He paid them each a silver and said he'd taken under consideration and sent them off. He had a handful more petitioners in line when Jade burst into the room. We need to talk, she said, her tone conveying an underlying now. Dirk ignored the whispers and stares as he rose from his throne. I'm afraid the rest of you will have to wait until next time. You are dismissed. They and the few servants in the room scurried out as he descended the dais and followed Jade out. She didn't say anything as she walked, just led him to Rose's personal library. She called it a study, but it was over twice as large as his and tended to be overstuffed with books and scrolls. As he entered, he saw it hadn't changed in that regard. Quills and ink bottles littered the desk and table and floor, along with open books, and half a dozen scrolls were pinned open on one stand. Same old Rose. She and the other Fae were sat at the table, worry creasing their brows. Sorry for the interruption, Dirk. We feel you need to know this sooner rather than later, Kanaya said. It's about the thieves! Ooh, that's a weird Feferi voice. It's about the thieves, Feferi said. We think we know who they are, Rose finished. Dirk frowned as Jade pulled up a chair for him. All right, he said. What do you know? They're called the Thieves of Flight, but they don't limit themselves to stealing. They're
They're just a rumor in the Confederation, and barely that, Iridia admitted after they were a good mile or two outside the city. Karka had been giving her expectant looks for the past few minutes, but she hadn't budged until then. He did his best to wait patiently for her to continue. I only know about them because we have Dursite and Prospician scholars on our digs. Any chance to find lost signs of the gods, or really anything to learn more about our shared history, attracts them like flies. We used to be one land, you know, not divided by the rivers like now. There's actually a theory that...
Iridia, Karkat said, cutting her off. You are killing me with anticipation here.
Iridia looked hurt, so Karkat quickly added,
You can tell me about the digs later, okay?
And that did the trick to brighten her back up. As weird as her smiling all the time was, her frowning upset him on a whole different level. Okay, well, underhand dealings aren't exactly unknown in Durs and Prospit, especially in Durs, especially before the Confederation formed.
I know, Karkat said. The Confederation basically squashed it all out.
She laughed, but not meanly. That's what they want you to think. The sky markets are still in full swing, but now people are more afraid to call the guards because what if they become suspect of being involved? It's honestly quite fascinating how cracking down has actually increased activity. I could spend hours talking about it, really, but I won't, she added, seeing Karkat's look. Suffice to say, she continued, you can buy just about anything or hire someone for just about anything. But there's a whisper of a rumor in the Confederation that if you really want to get something done, you leave out an offering of 8 clams on your balcony, or whatever equivalent you have, and a pair of thieves, used to be unheard of team-up of a Prospician and a Dursite, will arrive the next night, and you better have something interesting to offer them.
Clams. That's what we're worried about. Clam thieves? Dirk asked skeptically.
I admit their method of contact lacks a certain romantic touch, Rose said.
Dirk snorted.
Nah, that makes complete sense. Clams are great, the fairy said, snickering.
Dirk had no idea if she was being sincere, so he ignored her.
It's true, though, Kanaya said. The mother has had trouble with the pair before, and I would take seriously anyone willing to brave the liminal forests and poke what lies within. She and Rose shared a smirk that Dirk also ignored.
Yeah, they're a real pair of assholes, Jade growled.
Why didn't we recognize them sooner?
No one's seen them before, Jade said. They stay concealed when accepting their gig and never get found out until it's too late, and we had no reason to suspect a pair of infamous thieves caused a minor chaos at the tournament.
From what Prince Airden says, most of the Confederation don't even truly believe they exist. They're just like a ghost story to scare people new to the market. He knows better, though, and one of his informants confirmed it was them.
What do they want? Why mess with the tournament and not even succeed at getting away with the prize money? Karkat asked.
No one knows why they do what they do. They generally just take whatever job and cause some chaos when they can, Iridia finished.
Well, they certainly succeeded at that, Karkat grumbled.
What I'm trying to say is, don't feel too bad you didn't catch them. They're slippery, to say the least.
Thanks.
Don't mention it.
So why target the tournament? Dirk asked. And how did Roxy get tied up in all this?
The informant wasn't sure, just said that there was talk of a bigger plan, which is practically unheard of for them, as far as anyone knows. As for Roxy, there's no telling, but I think she's in deep, Dirk.
Iridia looked at Karkat expectantly. Do you, want to tell me more about what you're digging for or whatever? He guessed.
Iridia lit up and flapped her hands. Yes. So, as you know, we have 12 gods and goddesses, but there are 2 who rule above all others. Karkat settled into his saddle as much as he could as Iridia continued. It was going to be a long ride, but he was glad for the distraction along the way. Dirk sighed to himself as he paced in his quarters, unable to sleep. He had been dreading this since the moment Roxy left her family. She was getting in the way of over her head. Even Rose thought so, and he had no way to contact her. Rose said it was fine, that Roxy could handle herself, but she was backtracking on her urgent summons to tell him about it in the first place. Unfortunately, she was also right about one thing. There wasn't anything he could do. He just had to be ready for when she reached out.
Lots of stuff dropped there.
So yeah, when I first came up with Vriska and Mina as thieves for the tournament, I did not know if they were going to have more impact, but they certainly do. So, yeah, Thieves of Flight. It's like life and light put together. Flight. Because I'm clever like that. But yeah, that was a fun chapter to write. I liked the switching perspectives. I had to verify it with someone else that I wasn't making it confusing, but yeah, just switching perspectives while people are being told the same thing, and then at the very end, they're being told different things. I don't know. I like it. Definitely not something I'm going to do a lot, though. It's good to be sprinkled in every now and then. But yeah, shit starts heating up even more this next chapter, but I'm going to hold off on it because it's been like an hour, and I think that's a good time to stream. So I'm going to stop here. As always, you can contact me on Twitter, Dorkification, or Curious Cat, Jax Yax, if you have any questions or comments or anything about the fic, or you can leave a comment on the fic. My username on here is Amberlyn, as you can see at the top of the page. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoy listening to these. I'm not sure what I'm gonna do when I catch up. Like, I think maybe I'll catch up and then I might read my new chapter like the same day I post it, or maybe that weekend, or I don't know what I'm gonna do. We'll find out. I still have several more chapters to go to get caught up, probably another 2 or 3 streams, so we are good until then. But yeah, thank you guys for joining me. As usual, I'll have this up on YouTube usually by the end of the day, maybe tomorrow, depending on how lazy I get, with timestamps, so you can jump around to whichever section you want. Thanks again for joining me, and I will see you guys next time.